Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for gathering here today on our conference Defending Women's Rights.
Panie i Panowie, witamy wszystkich na naszej konferencji dotyczącej praw kobiet. Nazywam się Karolina Pawłowska i jestem dyrektorem w Instytucie Ordo Juris na rzecz kultury prawnej. Będę moderatorem dzisiejszej dyskusji.
Chciałabym powiedzieć tylko kilka zdań w ramach wprowadzenia do naszej konferencji. Jaki jest jej cel? Zebraliśmy się tutaj z najbardziej prominentnymi przedstawicielkami środowisk akademickich, rządowych, międzynarodowych, ekspertów reprezentujących cały świat. Ale dlaczego to robimy? Dlaczego mamy obowiązek bronić praw kobiet dzisiaj?
Is one of the most instrumentalized terms of our times. From the late 60s, it was openly used by the United Nations to foster population control agenda. During the conferences in Tehran, Bucharest and Mexico, the Neo-Malthusians many times stated that radical feminism, which is unfortunately identified with women's rights nowadays, is useful tool for controlling the population. And this process has gone very, very far, and now from late 90s, we are constantly convinced that sexual and reproductive health and rights agenda is about women's rights. That for women the best is to act just like a man, to avoid having babies or send them to the institutional collective childcare facilities as soon as it is possible. That motherhood is an obstacle to women's fulfillment. I believe that all of us agree that it is not true. It is in fact a very harmful and stereotypical way of thinking that is completely contrary to women's real needs. And there is plenty of evidence that shows it. Currently, this narration is very strong in Poland. In Poland, the Constitutional Tribunal ruling that banned abortion for eugenic reasons was used as a pretext to organize well-planned protest led by radical feminists. The aim of our conference is to show women that do not agree with aggressive, radical propaganda of sexual and reproductive health and rights notion, that they are not alone, that there is a lot of us and we can preserve our rights and our identity standing together. We can live happy life and fulfilling lives, being women and making women's choices.
I dokonując kobiecych wyborów. Możemy sprawić, żeby świat był bardziej przyjazny wobec kobiet, afirmujący kobiecość i chroniący godność każdej kobiety i każdego istnienia ludzkiego. Niniejsza konferencja potrwa najbliższe kilka godzin i będzie podzielona na panele tematyczne, podejmujące poszczególne aspekty tematu praw kobiet. Dzisiaj podczas naszego spotkania inauguracyjnego będziemy mieli dwie części tej konferencji. Pierwsza z nich poświęcona jest aspektom politycznym i doktrynalnym kwestii praw kobiet i praw człowieka. Druga zaś będzie poświęcona przede wszystkim kwestiom związanym z prawami kobiet i zdrowiem kobiet. Dziękujemy za Państwa uwagę i przekazuję głos naszemu szanownemu gościowi, pani profesor Chantal Delsol, która będzie mówić o aspektach doktrynalnych praw człowieka. Dziękuję bardzo. Prawo to jest koncepcja bardzo nowoczesna, ale czerpie swoje korzenie w godności chrześcijańskiej i w tym jest zakorzeniona. Nie ma praw w kulturze chińskiej czy hinduskiej. Jeśli są, to zostały tam przyniesione z Zachodu. Nie ma koncepcji godności ludzkiej, ani godności osoby w kulturach innych niż judeo-chrześcijańska. W okresie nowoczesnym i ponowoczesnym prawa coraz bardziej przejmują autonomię, nabierają autonomii w stosunku do swoich korzeni. Mamy prawa wynikające z natury, które nabywamy. Mamy też prawa w nowoczesnym ujęciu, które są zakorzenione w indywidualności. W dzisiejszym świecie każdy ma prawo do tego, czego chce. To zastąpienie podstawy praw, ponieważ w ujęciu naturalnym podstawą wszystkiego, co istotne, w tym wypadku praw, jest ustanowione, wszystko to jest ustanowione na tym, co jest święte. Ale to, co jest święte, przesunęło się w nowoczesności. W czasach chrześcijańskich to, co było święte, to były dogmaty religijne, które tworzyły ramy antropologii, a tym samym praw. Dzisiaj to, co jest święte, to wolność indywidualna, na której są oparte prawa z kolei. Jednakże taka ściśle indywidualna wolność staje się dzisiaj coraz bardziej radykalna i agresywna. Widzimy to, co się dzieje teraz na Zachodzie, szczególnie przez ostatnie 50 lat, okres bardzo silnej rewolucji, eskalację, przesyt praw. Prawa, które wystąpiły ze swojego łożyska jak rzeka. Oczywiście przekroczyły swoje ograniczenia antropologiczne i domagają się pełnej wolności. Domagają się tego, żeby stały się wszystkim. Prawa oparte są na swoim charakterze i swojej jakości. Dzisiaj oparte są z kolei na kaprysach i pragnieniach. Tradycyjna antropologia, zależąca od chrześcijaństwa, załamała się wskutek takiej sytuacji. Ograniczanie praw nie jest dzisiaj już uzasadnione. Dlaczego więc prawa stały się narzędziem honorującym i chroniącym indywidualny narcyzm, ściągając osobowość i koncepcję osoby do przepaści? Wolność traci swoje znaczenie. W epoce rewolucyjnej tak się właśnie dzieje. Cytuję: moja wolność kończy się tam, gdzie zaczyna się wolność drugiego człowieka. Pomyślmy o szaleństwie, jakie wiąże się z tym twierdzeniem. Prowadzi nas to bezpośrednio do uświęcenia narcyzmu, do wojny wszystkich ze wszystkimi. W filozofii personalistycznej, naszej filozofii, moja wolność, przeciwnie, nie zakończy się tam, gdzie zaczyna się wolność drugiego człowieka, ale tam, gdzie zaczyna się moja odpowiedzialność. Innymi słowy, to są ograniczenia, które narzucam sam sobie. I tam one się właśnie zaczynają. Bo nie będę, w przeciwnym razie nie będę podmiotem, ale egotystycznym zombie. Prawa dzisiaj opierają się nie tylko na narcyzmie, ale też na obsesyjnym egalitaryzmie, który również jest pozbawiony jakichkolwiek ograniczeń. Po odrzuceniu, obaleniu wszelkich tradycyjnych nierówności w imię praw człowieka, nie podważane są ograniczenia związane z zasługą. Wprowadzane są systemy kwot. Porzucana jest kwestia jakiejkolwiek roli na korzyść funkcji. Każdy jest uznawany za zdolnego do wykonywania każdej funkcji. Jest to nadmiar, przesyt praw. W rzeczywistości nie mamy bowiem do czynienia wyłącznie z funkcjami, ale też z rolami. Taka jest rzeczywistość. Istnieją pewne podstawy antropologiczne istnienia człowieka, zarówno z perspektywy antropologii sensu stricto, dotyczącej i prawdziwej dla każdego człowieka, jak również antropologii kulturalnej, kulturowej, dotycząca tej bądź innej kultury. W antropologii sensu stricto, dotyczącej wszystkich, nie powinno być prawem człowieka, aby naruszać prawa rodzicielstwa, naturalne prawa rodzicielstwa i pokrewieństwa, ponieważ natura człowieka jest przekazywana właśnie tą drogą, przez naturę i pokrewieństwo, naturalną transmisję. Tymczasem w antropologii kulturowej, w kulturze zachodniej, w zachodniej tradycji antropologicznej, powinno być prawem człowieka, nie powinno być możliwości dobrowolnego rozmnażania, posiadania dzieci bez ojca, ponieważ indywidualna wolność i odpowiedzialność, której bronimy na Zachodzie, wymaga, aby istniał ojciec.
For example, why women's right? Because of an anthropology that distinguishes groups of individuals. Women bring children into the world. Men do not. Modernity wants total equality and does not accept that an anthropology, one nature, one essence, is the basis of different rights. This is how transhumanism is expected to allow men to bear children, for example. Why this exists? Because contemporary society wants to put an end to the society of roles. Roles are tasks specific to groups, while functions are non-specific missions. All can perform the same functions, while not all can assume the same role. The role of the father is not the role of the mother, and vice versa. The existence of roles reflects the difference between people in terms of gender, of sex, history, skills, etc. However, modern society cannot stand differences, which produce hierarchies. She wants equality in everything, and in doing so, she turns all roles into functions. Everything is therefore, in principle, accessible to everyone. The main source of this debauchery of the egalitarian idea is the previous excesses of the idea of role. The societies of yesterday have institutionalized roles based on false and unjust assumptions in order to protect the powers, like, for example, the ban of women voting or studying for higher education on the pretext that they were unable to think. We have a lot of text about that. Still, we have fallen into the opposite excess, as so often happens in history, unfortunately. The result is that in postmodern society, there are no longer any predetermined, legal, and generally legitimate social roles. Everyone gives themselves a role according to their conscience, and again, very temporary. Because individual freedom is the sacred value for our time, we deduce that women have the right to have their own bodies, hence abortion. The right to dispose of one's properties and one's own body is the main maxim of what we can call contemporary libertarianism. The foundation of the doctrine is probably found in the text of Locke. This is an ideology that flourished with post-Marxist disappointment and now dominates the Western planet. I would like to say a final word about abortion. I would first like to remind you that after a certain number of weeks of pregnancy, there is no longer any doubt that an abortion is infanticide. This prompts us to speak of nihilism of the civilization of death. But things are more complicated, I think, more complicated. The "you will not kill" is inscribed on the pediment of all cultures without exception, without exception. With us, it is the law of Moses, but elsewhere it is other fundamental text. What changes from culture to culture are the exceptions you make to "you won't kill," the exceptions. Thus, the ancient pagans, for example, Greeks and Romans, ancient Greeks and Romans, practiced infanticide, but they did not kill heretics. Christians in the Middle Age and the Renaissance killed heretics, but since the Jewish religion have prohibited infanticide, our age forbids the death penalty for criminals, but allows infanticide. Does that make the murder more legitimate? Certainly not. But this prevents us, I think, from considering our times are especially perverted or nihilistic. They shift the limits elsewhere. That's all. I'm not happy about it. The cause of this is the very recent fall of Christendom. It was Christendom that prevented infanticide. Read the 2nd century letter to Diognetus. Jews and Christians, he says, were people who never kill babies. Our time is a return to paganism. The fall of the belief in transcendence gives way quite naturally to paganism, which is a kind of natural religion, a natural culture, if you want. Thus, we have no reasonable argument to call for the ban on abortion. This ban is based only on the belief that the child is an ambassador of God. However, the vast majority of our contemporaries no longer believe that human being is ambassador of God. It is as absurd to want to forbid infanticide to a pagan as it would be absurd to want to impose on him, for example, confession. We have first to convert him.
Thank you very much, Professor Chantal Delsol. Thank you for your speech. Thank you for your lecture. I think it was a great introduction for our panel, for our discussion, especially because you showed the real roots of our modern thinking on human rights and all this context of human rights notions and the differences between a classical perception of our obligations, functions, and the modern one. And I think it is just very, very important. And also thank you for your remarks on the paganism that is unfortunately getting stronger and stronger in our times, and I think it is also a very, very important point for our discussion. And now I would like to ask Dr. Justyna Melanowska about her lecture, because Dr. Justyna Melanowska will speak about relations between emancipation and human rights discourse. Dr. Melanowska will ask about, is it necessary to use this discourse to speak about women's needs and problems in the modern world? Thank you.
The title of my expose is Rights Are Weak Unless They Are Duties. And the first part is very brief, very short. The discourse on rights and the problem of emancipation. The first question that interests me here is whether we really have to use the language of rights to discuss women's problems. Can anyone who rejects this language be heard at all, or is it somehow outside the scope of modern discourse culture? We know that the notion of the barbarian at its historical core, implied someone excluded from the Greek language community, someone who does not belong to the ecumene, the common word. It seems that the language of rights is today's Greek, and whoever fails to use it must be regarded as a barbarian in two ways, not only by rejecting certain language practices, but also as someone who probably refuses to accept women's rights as such. So my first conclusion is that the question must be asked today about the possibility of emancipation from the emancipation. So the emancipation, the right to refuse the acquisition and extension of the rights. Look at us women here. What we are trying to do here and now, sitting in our rooms, is to carry out a kind of conquest of the language of rights, which is today tied to the liberal problem of negative freedom. But as some of us are conservative, we are obliged to respect the reality. So being respectful towards reality, let's talk about rights. And here, part 2 of my expose starts. I will be speaking about the sources of rights. There are two strong sources for all rights, God and human nature. Interestingly, today I shall not discuss the issue of natural law that comes with it. Interestingly enough, these are precisely the sources that the modern times have rejected. There are also 3 weak sources of rights, and they are contract, need, and custom. Let us have a look at these. First, rights obtained by means of contract. Anything can be agreed upon. Therefore, everything can turn out to be a right, and everything can turn out to be a violation of someone's rights. Remarkably, rights acquired in this manner do not have to be consensual. Access to power and legislative procedure is sufficient. The process of negotiating rights through a contract is often of a forceful nature, and the discourse of rights is associated with the discourse of struggle, race, class, or gender struggle. Rights must be won by fighting. The losing party must live as if they recognize these rights, although this may involve taking up almost everything they think about human, and even what most humans thought about it for at least 2,000 years. Example here is, of course, same-sex reasons equal of marriages. So here the conclusion would be that rights acquired by contract are often the result of force and influence. Roger Scruton also said that of intimidation and terror. So their basis is weak, and we may be doubtful if they are what they pretend to be, and this is progress in humanism. The second source of rights is need, or desire, as Professor Del Sol said. But I will be speaking of needs. Leszek Kołakowski has illustrated this with the following very simple example. I have the right to rest after a whole day's work, so I need to rest. What can be said about the need? Above all, perhaps, that the need can be justified or not. For example, I have indeed worked hard all day and I am tired, or I have not worked hard at all. When it comes to the social processes, it is not clear who and how would test the legitimacy of our needs, who would prioritize them, and on what principle shall we grant or deny rights. In fact, modern societies are condemned to self-declaration of the needs of different people and groups, and it is assumed here that the law must come from the need. For example, if someone says he or she has a need to change his or her sex, they must have the right to change their sex. and legal solutions should follow. This is a common conviction, I would say a superstition in our times. Interestingly, the obvious problem of any sort of barrier capable of stopping at some point the acquisition of rights justified by the need is not discussed. However, what if we keep in mind the problem of need, but go back to the classic answer concerning the person from the whole Western personalist tradition? We assume, after Boethius, that a person is an individual, a rational being, and then free and relational. The problem we face here is a free articulation of reason in the community of persons. When one takes the nature of the person, the acquisition of rights appears as follows. First, we have the nature of the person. So the fact that I am a reasonable creature and I live in relations. Then comes the need for articulation, because my rational nature needs to be expressed in the community. Then I get the right to articulation. The right is anchored in the person, in my nature, and it's expressing my nature. Then, when I articulate my reasonable nature, I have a possible merit. Because if I have articulated good, I have the merit. And if I have articulated wrong, it does not bring the merit. And if I have the merit, I have the right resulting from the merit. So here we have the whole process. Different thinkers have dealt with the issue of nature and human condition in social context. I will take just briefly two thinkers, totally different, and I will compare two approaches. First is Karol Wojtyła, who stands firm on the basis of the concept of human nature as a person, and the second is Hannah Arendt, who writes about human condition. Wojtyła believed that a person's participation in a community is authentic or not. As authentic, it can be solidarity or objection. As inauthentic, conformism or avoidance. The fundamental rights of the person is therefore the articulation in the community of persons. Of course, I am not taking those thinkers today very profoundly. I'm just more inspired by them. Hannah Arendt, in turn, distinguished three principles of humanum corresponding to the three basic conditions under which man has been given life on earth, and those are work, production, and action. So it can be said that the human condition here gives the need to work, to produce, and to act, and from this in turn comes the right to work, produce, and act. What is interesting here is that we can ask, what are the specific forms of action, work, and production carried out by women? Well, the most obvious answer is that specificity of female action was and is everything related to motherhood. So, conclusion from this part would be, needs can provide a stable basis for the acquisition of rights if they are linked to a concept of a human nature as a person or human condition. And now the third and final source of rights is custom. This is a very important matter and very underestimated, I think. According to the classical tradition, a custom is an informal standard of behavior sanctified by a tradition observed by the general public. In antiquity, the custom had a sacred character and sanction. Its observance was more important than the observance of the law. The custom was also considered to be a moral law. Nowadays, the influence of custom on the creation of legal norms in law is disappearing. How does custom relate to women's rights? Well, it is customary to stabilize the social roles and to organize the sphere of individual aspirations. It teaches what it means to be a woman, mother or daughter, widow, or, for example, teacher. But it also teaches all aspects of social interaction. For example, how to behave towards a mother, an elderly woman, or a teacher. It is a fundamental right of a person who takes a customary social role to live in a community that respects the custom. Therefore, a woman mother has the right to preserve the custom in the community in which she performs her social role. As for specific rights in this area, we can talk about negative and positive rights as for the vector. A negative right would be, for example, freedom from pornography, at least in the public sphere, but also freedom from all kinds of indecent behavior. Positive rights, for example, would be the access to good and proper custom-wise education for children. So here the conclusion is, taking the custom as their basis, the rights would focus primarily on stabilizing the execution of women's social roles, especially maternal and educational ones. To see how important customs are, we should remember what Tacitus said, leges sine moribus vane proficiunt. Law is worth nothing where there is no custom. And the summary is on women's rights. Taking into account everything that has been said above, women's rights are divided into negative ones, freedom from something, and positive ones, right to something. And according to their source, rights based on contract, need, or custom. On what concerns need, they can be based on the self-declaration of the subject, the concept of human person, or human condition. This allows us to distinguish between strong and weak rights. How does this work in practice? Just a few examples. A strong right based in human nature as a person would be a negative right from being spoken, being articulated. For example, we are now having in Warsaw some initiatives that are known under the slogan Women's Strike. Such initiatives violate the rights of articulation of women who are not represented by the protesters and who are included in the term women. The positive right of articulation established in human nature results, for example, in electoral rights for women. Weak rights, mostly autodeclarative, need-centered rights would be, for example, a negative right related to the self-declarative need of the subject, I don't want it, results in, for example, the right to abort the fetus. I don't want it. I need not to have it. I have right not to have it. Positive vector rights that are self-declared in the subject's need are, for example, the right to change one's sex. I need to change my sex. I have right to change my sex. If we, however, accept the concept of human person, we see that rights become stronger. For example, if we accept the fact that the person is, in Latin, alteri incommunicabilis and sui juris, that means that she can't be owned in any sense by anyone. Therefore, for example, a woman can't be mutilated, raped, forced to have sexual intercourse, forced into marriage, etc. But what is more, the right to integrity is not based in any kind of autodeclaration, but in the human person as such. Therefore, even if a woman wants us to break her integrity, we may not do it. We have a duty and obligation to respect her nature as a person. Similarly, the rights arising from any concept of the human condition give rise to the right to work or to take up and fulfill the role of the mother and other social roles. Of course, the sphere of rights always creates an immense potential for abuse. For instance, the right to take up and pursue the role of a mother can lead to demanding for the right to a child. Therefore, always and everywhere, if we mean the welfare of individuals and communities, we should give priority to and even abide by human responsibilities, human duties. The field for abuse is much narrower here. And my closing note is this. All I said so far is very weak indeed. If I wanted to criticize this lecture from liberal positions, I could do it in many ways. If I wanted to criticize it, for example, taking from the starting point John Stuart Mill's idea of harm, I would say, first of all, that the existence of rights is precisely the answer to the unbearable, full of harm fact of human condition. The rights protect from harm. We may interestingly argue on that, but finally, I think the concept of human condition turns out not to be what we are looking for while searching for the basis for rights. A more certain ground is provided by the concept of human as a person, and the most certain ground by far is to embrace the existence of a personal God as a source and guarantee of this nature. But here we learn not that much about rights. God does not say you have rights. We learn mostly about duties. You shall not. Thou shall not. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your very insightful and systematic lecture on this very, very important topics, starting from the differentiation between positive and negative rights, because it is very important to remember about this differentiation. I think that your lecture, along with the lecture of Professor Chantal Delsol, are just amazing background for our discussion, philosophical, theoretical, and doctrinal background for our discussion, which is very, very important, because we should be aware of all these things you have elaborated. Thank you so much. And now I would like to ask our next speaker, Mrs. Gabriela Kubi, about her thoughts of the notion of women's rights and how it is used to manipulate the society today. Because, as I told you on the beginning, Gabriela Kubi is one of the most known authors on gender and sexual revolution that also exposed in her book threats connected to this radical terms. Thank you so much.
I'm very happy to be able to be on this panel. And I thank the speakers before me for their very deep and enlightening thoughts. When I prepared my contribution, I had in front of my mind the thousands and thousands of women in beloved Poland, Catholic Poland, that are on the streets to demand the right to abort the child that is growing in their womb. And they go into violent means, they demolish churches and statues. And these are women who think they are fighting for something good. So I'm really speaking to them, and I hope they are listening to this conference, to rethink of what it is to be a woman. We are in the middle of a global war. This is a war between the culture of death and the culture of life. It is a war between Marxist atheists who want to establish equality and of believers in God who want to establish justice. It is a war between those who will establish a totalitarian dictatorship by manipulation of mass consciousness, the jettison of law, and the use of violence, and those who believe in the power of nature, reason, and God, and therefore fight for freedom and justice. They know that God, nature, and reason will win this war. Presently in Europe, the front of this battle is in Poland. We see that one nation after the other is falling away from God at an amazing pace. Spain, Italy, Ireland, Malta, just to name a few nations that have been deeply Catholic for centuries until very recently. Will Poland go down this road too? A nation that was able to withstand Nazi terror and communist dictatorship by the power of Catholic faith? All these once Catholic nations made incredible contributions to the culture of man in art, architecture, music, theology, literature, the establishment of justice through law, the moral foundation of society as the basis of the family. These nations now fall to the eternal temptation of the snake in the Garden of Eden. No, you will not die. You will be like God. But the snake is lying. First of all, we all will die. Also those who vandalize churches and destroy statues of the Mother of God, they too will die. It is not certain that your ashes will be recycled in a tree. You too have an eternal soul. Millions of unborn children die because their mothers and fathers want to have sex without being ready to become parents. They prefer to kill the child, and they fight for the right to kill the child at any stage of pregnancy, as the new president of the United States does. Dear sisters in Poland, maybe some of you only fight for the right to kill an unborn child that has a fatal abnormality. It also is a human being with dignity and the right to life. We do not want to have a society where only the healthy have a right to life and the sick are killed in whatever stage of their life. You may think you cannot bear the thought that you might have to care, let us say, for a Down syndrome child. You believe your life would be ruined. No doubt it is hard to accept such a fate. Parents of children with special needs should be highly respected and get every kind of help from the social environment and the state. The radical feminists in Poland and around the world fight for more. They fight for a human right to abortion. Dear women, are you aware of what you are demanding? After the horrors and atrocities of World War II, the nations came to a mutual consent that there are rights which every human being enjoys, simply because she or he is a human being with dignity. Of course, the protection of the right to life is the condition of any other human right. Is it really a human right that some humans have the right to kill other humans? You started your life as an embryo, so did I. Were we anything else than a human being in the womb of our mother, who allowed us to grow within her womb until she gave birth to you and to me? Yes, there can be conditions where it is very hard to bear the life-giving consequences of a sexual act. That is the life of another human being. But in order to avoid this consequence, do you really want to kill your child? We casually use the word abortion and count the numbers by the thousands or hundred thousands or the millions. Around 50 million children are killed every year around the globe before they are born. If you see yourself in a situation where the death of your child seems the only way out, you will have to choose between different methods of killing the baby. So it is good to know what they are. I will speak about 7 methods of killing the unborn child in some detail. Menstrual extraction. The suction method at the early stages of pregnancy is a risky do-it-yourself method used where abortion is forbidden by law. The International Planned Parenthood Federation distributes such handy suction devices in countries with high birth rates and delivers plans for making them oneself. If the woman fears she is pregnant, this device is used to suck away the uterine lining. The risk to women is very high, from a punctured uterus or an infection to an incomplete abortion. Number 2, curettage. This is the method of choice up to the 12th week of pregnancy. The baby, you can see it in the ultrasound sound examination, has a beating heart, little hands with fingernails, a fast developing brain, male or female sex organs. The uterus is dilated and a curette with a sharp tip is inserted into the cervix. The baby is cut up with this blade and the uterus is scraped out. The abortionist or assisting nurse must check whether all body parts of the baby are present in the bloody mass, because if anything is left in the uterus, serious complications can follow. Number 3, the suction method. A suction tube is inserted into the uterus and connected to a vacuum device that cuts the baby's body into pieces and sucks it up. Then the uterus is scraped out. Here also, the cut up body parts must then be checked for completeness. From the 4th to the 6th month of pregnancy, this process gets more difficult. The baby's tissue is now stiff enough that it can't be cut up. The cervix has to be spread wider because larger instruments must be inserted. The baby's arms and legs are cut off with a long, curved pair of scissors and are pulled out individually. The abortionist waits until the child has bled to death and then removes the torso. With larger babies, the head must be crushed so that it can be pulled from the cervix in pieces. Saline abortions. This method is used from the 2nd trimester to the start of the 3rd trimester. The risks for the mother are very high because the salt solution can get into one of the mother's blood vessels. About 200 milliliters of amniotic fluid is sucked out and replaced with salt solution. The baby swallows and inhales this solution. Over hours, it suffers an agonizing death through salt poisoning, dehydration, brain bleeds, and cramps. Within 24 to 48 hours, the baby is born through induced contractions, the dead baby, of course. The child is deep red. Mothers report that they can feel the baby's wild movements during its hours-long battle with death. Abortion with Rivanol disinfectant. The disinfectant Rivanol contains alcohol and is injected through the abdominal wall to mix with the amniotic fluid. Rivanol penetrates the tender, unprotected skin of the child in the uterus and destroys the cells. The high percentage of alcohol is very poisonous to the child, stops the heart relatively quickly, and triggers contractions. The result is the stillbirth of a yellow-colored child. Fetal homicide. Thank you, Madame Del Sol, for saying all this is homicide and not only a child born, taken to term. The child is murdered with an injection of poison to the heart. Viewing the baby through ultrasound, the abortionist sticks a long needle through the mother's abdominal wall, seeks out the child's heart, inserts the needle, and injects a potassium chloride solution into the heart. The poison prevents muscle contraction, causing the heart to stop. The dead child is delivered by cervical dilation and expulsion using hormone injections. This method is used with in vitro fertilization if more than one fertilized egg has been implanted and multiple births must be prevented. And last, the chemical abortion using the pill RU486 mifepristone. Swallowing pills seems less brutal than surgical methods. RU486 can be taken until the end of the 2nd month of pregnancy. An extremely high dose of the synthetic hormone RU486 blocks the hormone progesterone required for pregnancy. The uterus recedes, which strangles the child to death. The uterine lining dies and the child is expelled. The child's agony lasts many hours, during which it slowly dies of hunger, thirst, and suffocation. There's a discharge, and the fetus usually ends up in the toilet. Thrombosis, embolism, breast cancer, impaired fertility, heavy bleeding, heart attack, and cardiac arrhythmia can all result from a chemical abortion. Depression, sadness, broken relationships, unknown physical pains, infertility, a deep-rooted feeling of guilt may be the consequence of any abortion. It is called the post-abortion syndrome, but doctors who earn money by killing thousands of babies will not tell you about it. All this happens in a society that believes it is the height of humanism. Are we really? It is in reality a drop back into the most brutal barbarism we can think of. Dear sisters who fight for the right to kill your child, is this really what you want? I'm sure you don't. You just can't see a child in your life. But let me tell you, as a mother of 3 children and a mother of 3 grandchildren, life itself is extremely powerful. A living baby, tiny and helpless as it is, will find a place on this earth to exist together with you, his or her mother. Your baby will love you unconditionally as you are and as nobody else can love you. Countless women who resisted the temptation of ending the life of their baby give witness for the deep thankfulness that they did not fall into that trap, for the joy that their child gives them for a meaningful life. Is there anything more touching than the smile of a baby? The innocence, the pureness, the beauty, the soul that looks out of their eyes? Even if it was difficult to accept the pregnancy, even if the birth was painful, as it usually is, mother and baby are flooded with the hormone oxytocin, the hormone that gives happiness and creates bonding. When a child receives what it needs, it delights those around him with its smile, its untamed joy of life, its creativity, the light in its eyes, the laughter, the radiance of its sleeping face, its complete non-judgmental acceptance of mother and father and the whole world as it is. Parents witness the miracle of its awakening intelligence, The family rejoices in the words a child creates, the creativity of a free spirit, the declarations of love, of the pure heart of a child. When the mother's heart is near to the child, then the world is new to her as well. No one accepts you as completely as your own child. This will be a path for your own healing. A child will bond you to life itself. It will bond you to the future. The love you give a child now will come back to you once you need the love and caring of your children. We all want to make the world a better place. We do not make it a better place by killing unborn children. If you accept your child with your heart, give your loving motherly care to your child, if you're willing to make sacrifices for the well-being of your child, as every mother and father does, it might well be that your child will make the world a better place. Joy and deep satisfaction by fulfilling your motherhood as long as it is needed will be the reward. You will not face gruesome loneliness when you are old. Dear sisters in Poland, we need you. We need your yes to life, your yes to the culture of life, your yes to the family, your yes to children, your yes to God. Keep up the wonderful example Poland has been to the world by resisting ideologies and their deadly consequences with the power of faith. You have done it before. You can do it now. Thank you very much.
Dear Gabrielle, thank you so much for this powerful and touching speech. It is, I think, our hearts are broken, but also we are very much encouraged to fight for right to life of every child, for dignity of every human being, and yeah, really, it was very powerful. It was very touching. And very, very important, because it just showed that what the abortion really means. What is it in fact? So thank you very much for this speech. I think it will be very important for people in Poland, for women in Poland, especially because so many of protesters just did not know what they are protesting about. And I think that your speech would be a great, very important information for them. And now I would like to pass voice to Maria Madis, Director of the International Affairs at the Society of Protection of Unborn Children. And Maria will tell us also about the abortion and how the radical feminist movement is using abortion in this misleading way, saying that it's something about women's rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina. It is an honor to address this panel. And my remarks will be much more practical from the perspective of a political pro-life campaigner, summarizing some of the points made today, but above all, seeking to demonstrate why Poland is a wonderful example to us in that fierce battle for authentic human rights today. We in the international pro-life community, I want to say straight away, truly applaud the Polish people who have taken a stand in protection of unborn children and have now come under intense attack, encouraged by the worldwide pro-abortion media. We totally support your continuing efforts to ensure this protection will be fully established and maintained in your laws for generations to come. By this historic ruling last month, the Polish Constitutional Tribunal has set the truth about the sanctity of human life from conception before the entire world. This ruling seeks to restore protection to the lives of the most vulnerable children, those who are disabled and not yet born, as well as to give the support needed to their mothers, to welcome and love them regardless of their special needs. And it would be really difficult to overestimate the significance of this judgment in the global struggle to defend human life from conception. Our pro-abortion enemies, supported by national as well as international institutions, understand that fact only too well. And so in response, they seek to mobilize women, create a conflict of interest, and renew their attacks against the most vulnerable of unborn children under the deceptive guise of women's rights. As we've discussed today, an authentic human right can never be a threat to the right to life. Furthermore, authentic human rights can never be separated from our duty to protect innocent human life. And this is especially true for women, who are particularly called to nourish and care for life. It is our experience throughout many legal battles that only moral absolutes reflected in national and international law can really protect the society's weakest and most vulnerable human beings. Therefore, a law permitting the killing of an unborn child can never be a just law. The legalized killing of unborn children who may be suffering from a disease or a disability can never comply with authentic human rights. It is evident, therefore, that the so-called women's rights, as they were championed and still are championed on the streets of Poland, are not authentic human rights. On the contrary, pro-abortion fake rights of women are an attack on womanhood, and their attack and betrayal of mothers when they need support the most. What do pregnant women need? They need accurate, up-to-date information about care practices and resources available for individuals with disabilities and their families if they are faced with that reality. The experience of our post-abortion counseling service called Abortion Recovery Abortion Recovery Care Helpline, supported by international research, shows very clearly that many women who have aborted their children on the grounds of a disability are especially traumatized. And why is that? These women, who often wanted the child very much, find it particularly difficult to come to terms with the fact that they chose to abort their sick baby when that baby needed them the most. By comparison, mothers who gave birth to their child, even knowing that the baby would die soon after birth, emphasized the peace experienced at the time of natural bereavement. In England and Wales, almost all, but certainly over 90% of babies suspected of having Down syndrome are aborted. As prenatal testing is becoming more widely available and strongly recommended, women may feel that it is irresponsible to opt out. International studies, on the other hand, show that in stressful situations and often without receiving adequate explanation regarding what a certain diagnosis may involve, or when they are unable to comprehend this information fully, women find it easiest to comply with what they believe is the recommendation of healthcare professionals. A 2012 Norwegian study demonstrates that while screening technologies increase options, they also effectively decrease choice, and that is freely made decisions. The new prenatal tests, such as non-invasive prenatal testing in the UK, target children with Down syndrome. This is, of course, deeply disturbing. It signals the determination by our government officials to eliminate people with Down syndrome and others with disabilities. This is clearly a form of prenatal quality control. This is modern-day eugenics. It is deciding that some human beings are not good enough, are not useful enough by our standards. And this is sending an awful message to disabled people in our society, saying, what good are you? You just suffer and die. In fact, it would be better if you had not been born. Abandoning the legal protection for the disabled children has created a social expectation to get rid of them. And this is a huge attack on humanity, on unconditional love, on security for anyone. Because once we accept that pain and suffering can be eliminated by eliminating people, where could one draw an end? And now this large-scale attack on humanity and authentic human rights has been launched by instrumentalizing women at the time they can be very vulnerable. In 52 years, abortion in Britain has spread from what was intended as strictly restricted to an epidemic. Now, under the lockdown rules, abortion is just a phone call away, available in your own home. A woman, perhaps isolated and confused, perhaps pressured by others, perhaps in abusive relationships, can kill her own child with pills she has obtained by mail, according to fake women's rights. Those who advocate for such so-called rights paint a picture of a calm, cool, collected woman who, weighing her options with expert advice, decides freely. But overwhelming evidence shows that the reality of women, so to say, benefiting from these so-called rights, is a woman who is cornered and feels she has no choice. A 2012 Brazilian study found that while women did not always fully understand the disability their baby was diagnosed with and needed greater attention by health professionals than they received, yet it showed when the option of continuing the pregnancy was chosen, a feeling of intense hope is observed, a feeling that change might be possible. As long as there is life, there is hope. We are therefore deeply grateful to the Polish court and people behind this ruling who have just given that hope to mothers and their families by determining that the abortion of children diagnosed with disability is incompatible with the Polish constitution and numerous principles of international law. Indeed, according to the preamble of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, children with disabilities should fully enjoy all human rights on an equal basis with other children. It would be highly hypocritical, therefore, to respect such equality for children only after birth and not before. We should also recall that the reservation presented by the Polish delegation during the ratification of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities stated clearly that one of its articles, number 25A, cannot be interpreted as a way of confirming the right of an individual to abortion or ordering the state to provide access to it. The Polish Constitutional Tribunal had already recognized the interrelated nature of the protection of human dignity and legal guarantees of the protection of human life in its judgment of 27 January 2004. In that stated, there can be no protection of human dignity if there are no sufficient grounds to protect life. Now, with the new ruling, the tribunal has truly ruled in favor of human dignity, fully in line with the preamble of the Convention of Rights of Persons with Disability, according to which discrimination against anyone on the basis of disability is a violation of the inherent dignity and value of the human person. The moral blindness, as so eloquently explained before by Gabriel Kubi and other speakers of our society, has grown to the extent that the killing of 50 million unborn children each year is no longer considered a crime that cries out to heaven. Consequently, millions of women walk the earth wounded to the core in their femininity, in their motherhood, in their ability to love, to say nothing of those who all share in these wounds, even if they all share responsibility for inflicting them. The extensive permissiveness is sadly the trend in virtually every country where abortion was legalized in so-called hard cases. That is, in cases when the baby has been conceived in rape or in cases when the baby has been diagnosed with a disability. And in none of these countries did it stop at these so-called hard cases. Once a country has abortion, in certain cases, it has abortion. And it is extremely difficult to turn around. Poland is set to go against all odds in doing just that, in reversing the injustice and harm done to its people and its culture. The pressure on pro-life Poland to give in is immense, from powerful voices from within as well as without. However, those powers don't love life. They don't love women. They don't love Poland. Polish pro-life laws are not merely laws that represent certain values and are dear to Polish people. They really show who you are. A civilization can be judged by how it treats its most vulnerable members. Unborn children are the most vulnerable members of the human family. While a mother's womb should be the safest place, it is statistically one of the most dangerous places to live. Unborn children with disabilities, in turn, are the most vulnerable among the unborn. It is therefore the protection of these children and their families that is the core criterion in evaluating the level of our civilization. Poland has illuminated the way to the rebuilding of a truly civilized society, where innocent life is protected from conception and mothers supported in their noble mission to nourish life. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maria, for your great speech. It is so true that our ruling of our Polish Constitutional Tribunal should be perceived as a great step towards full realization of human rights and should be, I hope, it should be an inspiration for other countries to do the same, because we are doing, I think, something to protect human rights now, and something very important. And I hope that your message will also be heard here in Poland. So thank you so much for your speech, for your lecture. And now I would like to pass voice to our great guest, Professor Angela Gandra from the Ministry of Women, Family and Human Rights of Brazil. Professor Gandra, as I stated before, is a special representative, yes. Of family in Brazil. So thank you so much for coming here to Poland to our conference.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you. I just want to thank Ordo Iuris for hosting this so important event at this moment, and for the invitation. I was thinking about a broader talk or lecture, because I wanted to talk about abortion itself, not only in the case we have here now in discussion, as a professor of philosophy of law and jurisprudence, and also as a philosopher itself, and also because I want to show what we're trying to do in my country, to defend life. Why did I choose to talk more? Because to open up this Pandora box, with this excuse, it's gonna open up lots of political and social problems, and abortion and all atrocities it can happen. So I taught about a lecture on understanding, defending, and promoting women. I loved when I received the conceptual law, the conceptual note here that says we are defending women's rights, that express what we trying to do in this event today to show that we are defending women's rights first, no, and because there's a lot of a lack of good information, no, and on the other hand, a lot of manipulation. As the conceptual note says, no, it's an ideological agenda that we have on abortion, and this is a way of trying to get there, no, with kind of compassion and whatever, no. So I think we have to give good information as this event. We have to promote things like that bring, like Gabriela said, no, the way we commit abortion, no. Besides, we should go for the roots of utilitarianism, which takes advantage of women to transform them in a means instead of an end themselves, no, and is the beginning of then making them kill their children because of utilitarianism too, no. Sorry. We heard, no, the word heard about the riots here, the protests here, no, a lot of noise they do, and with the media serving as an echo, but they are not the majority. And even here, they are not the majority. And all over the world happens the same thing. No, they do a lot of noise, but it's like they don't mean all women, and also it's not all about noise, but it's all about an unfair play. No, with fake news, with inflation of facts, with wrong statistics, with lies, no? So we have to give this information and tell the world that it's not just like that, no? Ideology is not a way of thinking, it's not a thought, it's an imposition, no, it's a lack of knowledge transformed and moved by empty slogans, no? And when we see this agenda of abortion, we can see behind that someone wins a lot of money or power with it. No, it's not a real interest, it's a self-interest. No, it's not because of compassion or concern on the common good or on people.
Because of compassion or
sorry.
Concern on good on
you can speak, I suppose.
Sorry. Sorry for my voice. C.S. Lewis said in The Abolition of Man, manipulators hate the people they manipulate. And that's what happens when we don't think about the human being as a whole, but we try to manipulate them to go this way, no? In the abortion way. No. So we have to give good information. Our Ministry of Women, Health and Women, Family and Human Rights, we try to go all around, articulating, offering material, involving families, go to legislators, go to judges to explain what is going on. I can give even an example. Yesterday I went to the Supreme Court in the name of the Secretariat for the Family to show that the ideology of gender can do a lot of harm to children, to families. And so we have to go and say what we think, and give good information. And also, I think that abortion is rooted in this hypersexualization we have in society now. Now, it's a way of manipulating people to make people weak, emotional, violent, irrational, and and stimulates consumerism. And what is behind it? A lot of money going on. We have to show that this industry of sex and abortion, they don't care about people at all, because they put people in garbage, no? But they win a lot of money, no? And the main victims are women, no? We can see the labs with contraceptives and pornography, fashion appeal, motors, and the abortion itself, no? In this sex industry, no, we have abortion as one of the worst consequences. But besides, we have, and I did a big campaign last year and this year, we have a lot of suicides and violence departing from this sex industry, no? Because sex and violence go, well, always together, no? And women suffer that in their body too, no? And in a campaign we had on suicide last year, we could notice that affective frustrations because of not being loved or respected took women to suicide, to commit suicide. And I always think, as a member of the government too, that I can't only see things as political or social, but I always think as a secretary of the family, that behind all there's a heart that suffers and bleeds before and bleeds especially after the abortion. Yesterday I was coming from Brazil, and during the flight I saw a movie. I watched the movie Bombshell that is very sad about harassment, but it's incredible how a woman there cries when she starts to explain what happened to her. No, and we promote this today in the society. We provoke instincts, and then there are going to be more relationships without love, without respect, with violence, and women are those who suffer more. No, and sometimes I think that aggressive when women start to be aggressive, no, it's because it's a way of vengeance. You know, they want to avenge. Is an avenger. Why? No, because the soul is not at peace. No, because she's hurted. No, so we have to help before. We have to help during. No, the decision, not promote. No, to go on the same track. No, I mean, like the narco traffic wins a lot of money with wanting to legalize drugs and everything, so never caring about people. The same with this international law for abortion, and we have to see a human being behind that. No. In the sense, no, thinking about the baby, no, I remember the philosopher Bernard Williams that said, no, that what really matters there, no, is the nature of the fetus, no, the nature of the unborn child, no. We're not supposed to determine when they become a human being, no, but because the DNA is already there, no, but we just have to recognize that they are human beings, no. And he wrote, it is a debate which has no transcendental or religious topic. No, it's not a religious or transcendental topic, but is limited to the real definition of the life of a human being. No, its inviolability as a whole not being possible to be masqueraded by steps of development. No, and when we started talking about abortion in this case or in that case. No, the right to life is unconditional. And then if we talk about steps, no, like 12 weeks or 14 weeks or 16 weeks, no, then 9 months, and then euthanasia at 7 years. 7-year-old boy suffered euthanasia recently, no. So we open up this gate, no. So it's very important to have in mind that the woman is a human being and can't be treated as a means for earning money or having fun, and the baby is a human being too, no, and has to be respected in his right to live, no. Bernard Williams says, when rationality is rejected by trying to justify and give a definition for what we want that to be, no, we change the terminology. We try to have a performative effect. Like in Brazil, we try to say it's not an abortion, it's an interruption of pregnancy. It's different. No, it's an abortion, and it's a homicide, and we have to say things clearly, no, and also say that the woman has not the right to choose for the child, no. It's not a part of her body, no. It's a human being depending on her, no. This is our nature. We are born dependent. We depend somehow during life, and we die depending, no. And the child has, no, this right already to live, to life, but she depends to exercise this right, no. The first human right. Life is the first human right. Without it, we can't exercise any right. And it's ridiculous to say, no, well, I have all the rights. I only don't have the right to live, no, to be born, to life. No, this is so ridiculous, no, philosophically completely mad, no. So we have to get to this like these topics in a profound way, in a deep way. We can't be pragmatists to say, no, this life doesn't matter. No. We have to go and see, oh, this is real, not the first human right. No. And when I think, no, as a philosopher too, no, when I think we have to explain to a mom, no, or to the society, why it is this is wrong, no? To kill a person is wrong. To kill your baby is wrong. I have to explain, and I have to hear that this is a right. What happened before? No, how did we get to this thought? No, that's why I go back to utilitarianism and this hypersexualization that make people animals. No. That's why John Finnis, a philosopher from Oxford, he would say, this is anti-human. No, it's like, it's not a human, a mother, even an animal. It doesn't do anything to the baby. It goes there and protect. So what happened? No, when did we become irrational or unreasonable? No, and it's interesting that Hannah Arendt was quoted here. She says, no, she says, in Adolf Eichmann judgment, we are capable of the evil, but it's not our thought that takes us to the evil, but not using our human quality. The problem comes up when we renounce of thinking and convert our thoughts in empty cliches before any pressure, and do not allow us to give a personal answer and reasonable answer to the issues in front of us, to solve problems instead of hiding from them. And that's it. That's what happens. Sometimes we don't even think more. We just go for these slogans because it's politically correct, or because it seems like more compassionate or whatever, So we have to go for these deep reasons, sound reasons to act, because each choice leaves a mark, and this choice of abortion is going to have an eternal scar in a woman's soul. So also I wanted to talk about abortion in general as equality. Sometimes women say, I have my relationship and then I get pregnant and then I have to carry the baby and I have to have it, and the men are not there. But we have to call men for action too. I remember a doctor in Holland that he said that there they commit euthanasia because people are alone. We can leave the woman alone. We have to build this dialogue and even bury the burden together if we have this condition of an incapable child. Or I have a Down syndrome girl there in my family, and it's not a burden, it's a treasure, and helps to unite the family, and it's so good. People don't know that, but when we unite ourselves, it's much easier, and we have to rebuild this dialogue too. And sometimes I've seen in my life, and I'm still seeing that men want. Sometimes they say, "No, it's my child, and I want to go for it." So it's not this excuse of equality is not also reasonable. The other thing is like. Sometimes we think about abortion, not in this case, but abortion in general, as a right in the sense, the right to my body, to give my body, to have or not to have a child, and whatever. So I think as a human being, our freedom is to think before, during and after relationships. Love relationships are not biological only. It's not a biological act. But it touches our heart and it touches our soul. And we have to go for love. Sometimes I think we human beings say to make love as to refer to relationship, and I don't think human beings have sex only, because they should give their soul when they give their bodies, and the consequences for us are not only as the animals, we get involved. We have a heart, we have a soul. So sometimes we want to defeat our nature, or we want to despise the nature. But the nature is faithful to itself, and then we suffer the consequences. And I've seen a lot in my life about the consequences of abortion in a woman's body and soul, but also about love. I think if we say like a relationship is to make love, I think also that life should come from an embrace, and we should embrace life too, when it comes. So even if it's not what we wanted. There's a poem in Brazil that is called Morte Vida Severina. It's like is that and as a life of a poor person from the north of Brazil, Severino. And this poem says, when in the end of the the poem, a child is gonna come to the world, no, and she's very poor and very, very weak, no, but people are celebrating life, no, and saying, no, it's Severine, no, I mean, it's poor, but it's life, no, it's life, no? And we have to embrace. And this is the spirit of a human being, if really they go for love in their relationships and they embrace love and life, no, as a consequence, no. I want to talk a little bit about freedom too, no. I think a woman is free, no, to open herself to a relationship, yes, no, but after that, she's not free to take out the baby, because the baby has already his own freedom, no, to as a human being, a constitutive freedom, but has to be helped to exercise it, not at the time yet, as a baby born can exercise its freedom either, or an infant till it grows, no? So I think we have to understand what is freedom to know. This freedom of killing we don't have in any stage of life, no. The other thing I wanted to say, well, I'm just mixing some ideas, not sharing with you some concerns I have on these topics, no? But I want to come back to this liquid modernity that have liquid relationships, as your own philosopher says, Zygmunt Bauman, no? And anthropologically, we call this crisis of love. No, it's a crisis of love, and it's real there. No, and that's why we don't love in our relationships sometimes, and we despise life too because of this crisis of love. Love is not only feelings or feeling something or having fun, but love is a decision, and love is to carry burden too, because we love. No, and in life we have a lot of these situations now, I mean, to help an older person, to help, and we would like to be loved when we will need people too, because we will anyways. No, so we have to remember, and I'm almost finishing, that anthropologically we have to think that motherhood for a woman is not only a biological role. No, I had my baby, I didn't have, so I'm not a mother, or I'm a mother. No, motherhood is her vocation in a way that is anthropological. All women are mothers. No, for example, the minister in Brazil, Minister Madis, she couldn't have a baby because she had an abuse when she was a child. She suffered pedophilia, and then she couldn't have babies anymore. And she says, I'm the mother of the nation. I help everybody in Brazil. No, and in the whole world, I want to help people. No, this is a vocation of a woman. No, she wants to help. She was made to help. And if we consider that, like, even looking at a woman biologically, I say, she's the one who receives in a relationship, she's the one who buries the baby, she's the one who feeds the baby, and there's a lot of fulfillment in this, because she has this heart, she has this vocation, and she generates generosity in society. You can see that. You can see that, well, when women are generous, the society moves on. I can tell you, even like in the pandemic we had, we were taken from our isolation and, I mean, our individualism to, there was a call to solidarity, a general call to solidarity, even intergenerational solidarity. And the women there, I saw them doing so much so much and generating generosity all over the society, because we have this heart, we have this capacity. I remember I read a book lots of years ago that was called Me, a Leper. It was a professor of Sorbonne that suffered leper, and she went to India and she stayed like 30 years in a bed, receiving people all the time, no? And people said, well, she was ugly because she lost all members, and she was always listened to people, and people went there to talk to her. And once a person said, why people come to talk to you? You don't even see them. But I always receive each person as her mother, and I open up myself to them so that I can I don't see their eyes, but I listen to their hearts, and this is the way she spent her life there, and I mean, what do I mean by that? That all women are mothers. All women can change the society. To her heart. So that's what I want to leave here. Bring women's heart to the stage. Bring not only her mind and her heart, but her heart. And I want to show, and I'm trying to do that in my country, to show that women are much more than a body, and a child is much more than a body, because she has the right to have her future, and she has a role in this world too, and we have to let it go. The worst thing that can happen to a person is not leave, not be born. If any one of us was asked, would you like to be aborted? Nobody, because we love life. So let's call women's hearts to serve society in a way, and another thing is like to play our roles wholehearted. I mean, put our hearts in this mission that we have in society. So I think even if we receive a child, that is not has incapacities or disabilities, and we're gonna be able to love. We're gonna take the best of us, and we can in the challenges, and we can teach people to do the same. And we're gonna see that child, as I saw in my family, is a lesson for us. It takes the best of us, and serve society with their love too, and helps us to love more. And to end, I'm gonna say things that we are doing to arrive before. I mean, what do I mean? So if we have this crisis of thinking about abortion in this case, it's because we have these steps before, like utilitarianism, to misunderstand the right to life, to misunderstand the sex, to misunderstand love, and then it comes. That seems so normal, to kill a baby that is unwished or whatever, and I think we have to go to arrive before. And I'm going to talk about 4 public policies we have there to call women to action. And when they are given themselves, they give totally. So first of all, we are trying to help women to do their role in society, professionally, and also be unreplaceable where she is, that is her home. So we are trying to build an agenda of balance between work and family, and also with responsibility to call men to action at home, to talk about equity, to see the laws and everything. So this helps because then women can see that they can be mom, they can do a lot for the society, and they can do. Women are multitask, normally, and they can do, and then they do that well. So, and also trying to bring entrepreneurship for more vulnerable women. Also, we are trying to bring women to politics because they really change the society. Today we have a Congress that has more women. The moment we have more women in Congress in Brazil, you can imagine the eye they have, the sensibility. They have so good proposals, and we have to put them helping, not defending women's rights, and not going against their own representatives. The third thing is like rebuild the dialogue between women and men, and teach love again, and teach good manners, respect, to fight violence. In a positive way. It's a good feminism. It's not even a feminism. It's like not opposition or violence. It's like, let's rebuild. This so important exchange, the richness of each one to society. And the last thing is that defending life. In the case of a person that is not capable, or in our case was in the Zika virus, instead of approving abortion on the Zika virus, what the government did, gave a pension till the child, till the end of the life of this child. So we gave a pension to help this life to come up, but we didn't accept abortion. So I'm ending. So sorry. I want to bring women together to transform the society. To help each other, to help even to give the child, and we're helping that in Brazil to the Supreme Court, and to help this. I can educate this child. I can. So let's see who is going to receive, and we give to the state, and the state goes for a family, and really goes. We're trying to do that, and also Valerie is here with us. We're trying to move the world. To see that abortion is not a right. It's not an international or local right. It's not a right at all. It's all the way around. The life is the first right of a human being. So we signed the Geneva Consensus Declaration some weeks ago, and countries are still going for it, even. Though people say, no, it's going to change elections. No, this week Paraguay signed the Geneva Consensus Declaration. We have to be together to show. Sometimes states are not strong enough to say, I don't go for abortion. So let's keep firm, to show it's not defending our opinion. We are defending the human being. And also go for the academic world, give lectures, explain things, persevere, to give good doctrine, not doctrination, not ideology, good doctrine. Also social media. Go to social media. Don't regret tomorrow what you accepted today. We have to go, and each person can do a difference if you go to social media, to courses, social projects. You can imagine in pandemic or in Brazil how the NGOs are helping in this, with social projects, and also even the government has as a patria voluntaria, that is a social project to involve the social society, the society, and each person. Sometimes we have a person just beside us who wants to commit abort and to go through abortion, and how do I understand her? How do I talk to her? No, this is we can do the big and the small. No, each action has its power to transform. No, so let's not underestimate humans. We and women's capacity for the good, for the beauty, for the truth. No, especially to love and teach to love. Let's recall them, to this road, the maternal road, the anthropological motherhood they have, and to talk and finish with women in Poland. I always admired you for your struggle and history. I study a lot of your history, and it's incredible what you suffered, what you did, and now, please don't go back. Don't go back. Keep on giving the world your example of love, of firmness, and of big heart. Please do that. And don't open this Pandora box. And protect you, your children, the next generation, with your example today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your great speech. I think you have pointed out so many important things, so many important areas where should we act to show that then to perceive our real rights, real women's rights, and how to help women in their everyday lives. I think it is very, very important, and it's great and very inspiring to hear that you have such policies in Brazil, because it's really great. It's really something great to help women in their everyday lives. And it's also great that you are trying to promote these values at the international level. And I think that your speech, that your lecture would be a great beginning or passage from our first part to the second part of our conference. And now I would like to ask Mrs. Valerie Huber, Special Representative for Global Women's Health in United States Department of Health and Social Services. As I told you on the beginning, Mrs. Valerie and Department of Health is doing so much great things also at the international level to protect women's rights, fundamental rights, right to health, real right to health. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm happy to present after my good friend and colleague, Angela from Brazil. I have to say it's really a pleasure to join the esteemed colleagues on today's panel. And thank you, Ordo Iuris, for inviting me to be a part. Today, I'd like to share a little about what the United States government is doing to preserve life and to protect life under the Trump administration. And I'm here to reaffirm that every woman, every human being, born and unborn, has a God-given right to life. That's the position of the Trump administration, and it has been since day one. It's really not glib to pronounce President Trump the most pro-life president in recent history. And he is and has been advancing a culture of life in our nation and around the world. Within just days of taking office, the president signed an executive order to protect taxpayer dollars from subsidizing abortion. It was called Protecting Life and Global Health Assistance. And this executive order required that all foreign NGOs that receive U.S. global health assistance focus on promoting health, not abortion. If they receive any U.S. taxpayer dollars at all for global health assistance, they may not actively promote or provide abortion, not only with the funds they receive from the United States government, but with any funds that they receive at all. Let me be very clear. The United States is not investing a dollar less in global health assistance. Protecting life and global health assistance just assures that every dollar actually goes toward expanding the culture of life through improved health for people around the world, and not one taxpayer dollar goes toward the culture of death. But while protecting life and global health assistance provides accountability for U.S. taxpayer dollars here for our foreign health assistance, it does nothing to push against an accelerated and unrelenting effort by the United Nations and other international organizations to falsely assert that abortion is an international human right. And that's why, with the full support of the President, our Secretary at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Secretary Azar, commissioned the inauguration of Protecting Life in Global Health Policy, or PLGHP. And the purpose of it was to build a global coalition of countries to stand in solidarity on the promotion of women's health, the family as foundational to every healthy society, and the sovereign right of countries to defend innocent life through their pro-life laws. And in doing so, then we will be able to work together to promote and advance health and well-being for women around the world. I've been so honored to be able to lead this all-of-government effort where we can amplify together the importance of these pillars. Last year, 24 countries signed at least one joint statement with the United States at the World Health Assembly and at the United Nations, and together we represented more than 1 billion people. And just as Angela mentioned just a few minutes ago, just a short time ago, on October 22nd, Secretary Azar and Secretary Pompeo co-hosted the ceremonial signing of the Geneva Consensus Declaration, led by Brazil, Egypt, Hungary, Indonesia, Uganda, and the United States, and co-signed now by a total of 24 countries representing every single region of the world, and representing more than 1.6 billion people. We are so proud that Poland is one of our valued partners on the Geneva Consensus Declaration, and that your own Minister of Foreign Affairs delivered Poland's statement pledging Poland's partnership. And he did so on the very day that the news of Poland's pro-life stance was announced. We so appreciate the courageous stance of Poland and all of the other countries. These 34 countries pledge ourselves to work together until we can claim victory surrounding these priorities at the United Nations, at the World Health Assembly, and elsewhere. If by chance you've not had an opportunity to participate in that virtual event, I invite you to go to our website at hhs.gov/declaration, and you can hear Poland's Minister of Foreign Affairs, as well as other country statements, including Angela Gandra on there as well. You can also read the declaration, you can see what other countries have signed on, and you can tell partnering countries that it's not too late for them to also join this movement. There are many other countries that have a pro-life stance, even within their own constitutions, where they state very forcefully that life begins at conception, and yet they have not yet joined this declaration. This is a perfect opportunity for us to all stand in solidarity. Let me tell you what's so significant about the Geneva Consensus Declaration. This declaration is on the official record as are the principles of the Declaration. This coalition is real and it can be powerful. And the reality is that even when governments change, the agreement made still stands. Even if one country changes government, there are other leaders who will stand up and step up and continue this important work. Even if the priorities of one government changes as the result of an election, the coalition continues just without that country. And we will continue to invite more countries to join the coalition, to sign the declaration, because this is a living document, and we hope it will only grow stronger with time. Just this week, it was entered into the official record in the World Health Assembly, and so it lives immemorial in Geneva. The fact is that at the United Nations and elsewhere, there is an aggressive push to deem abortion as an international human right. And just to make it very clear, as some of our colleagues have said during this conference prior to my speaking, there is no such right. And this is a dangerous agenda. Think about it. If abortion were to be considered a fundamental human right, as is being aggressively pushed, any country that has any abortion restrictions could be deemed a human rights violator. And you can imagine the amount of pressure, the threats to cut their foreign assistance. I am sure that what Poland is experiencing right now pales in comparison to what any country would experience if abortion were deemed an international human right. The attacks that would increase against the core foundations of our countries, it's really unimaginable, unimaginable. And so that's why the Geneva Consensus Declaration is so important. It is much easier for UN agencies and other pro-abortion forces to single out individual countries, apply pressure, intimidate them in silence, but there's strength in numbers. Countries representing every region of the world are uniting and saying in unison, not on our watch. The agreement of these 34 countries is important, and it is critical for women's thriving. It is fundamental to the flourishing of our society. The fact of the matter is that principled pro-life policies and the provision of quality health care to women and to girls around the world do not conflict. We can and we are doing both things at once. And to those countries who are aggressively promoting abortion as if it were a human right, we also invite them to engage in civil discourse and mutually agree to address women's serious health conditions, many of them fatal. And these critical needs should not be eclipsed by battles over abortion at the UN and elsewhere, a topic for which we will never all agree. We also invite those countries to put aside this controversial issue and leave it to the individual countries to set their own laws. The UN shouldn't be meddling in this issue, nor should other countries. Unfortunately, most of these countries so far have been unwilling to engage in this civil discourse to find a real solution. We will continue to extend that invitation. As always, we seek consensus, and we hope we can arrive there with non-aligned countries on these issues. But I want to be very clear that we are honored to stand with like-minded countries. Together, we are finding our voice, and I have great hope for where this coalition may go. In almost every meeting I have had with countries who value the pillars of protecting life and global health policy, that is, shared views for supporting improved health for women, the family as foundational to society, and the sovereign right of every country to make their own laws protecting life, they express appreciation for the Trump administration. They also share how important it is for all of us to work together on these issues of great consequence. because we recognize that really we are only strong when we are stronger together. And we have to win this for the sake of our nations, for the sake of our civilization, for the sake of women everywhere, born and unborn, of every right, of every life, because it's the right thing to do. And so today, as we talk about women's rights and genuine health and how that intersects with abortion, there is a path forward, and it is together. And we look forward, as long as we are able, to be in this fight together with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your speech, for your lecture. I think that these things you are leading in, especially concerning the Geneva Declaration and other statements that were prepared last year, is something historic. I think it's something so important for our future, and something that can really overcome this very bad tendencies, very negative tendencies that are visible at the international level, at the United Nations. I think this is really a great step forwards, and really thank you both Valerie, thank you and Professor Gandra for leading this great movement. Okay, now I would like to ask Mrs. Sharon Slater, head of Family Watch International, to have her presentation. Just to remind you, I was introducing Mrs. Slater, but I would like to do it one more time. Mrs. Slater is the head, as I said, of Family Watch International, which is one of the most important, most accomplished non-governmental organization that is consolidating like-minded movements, and I think that we all learned from you, from your organization, a lot. So thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I was asked to talk about abortion facts, understanding the negative impact of abortion on women, and I'm also going to talk about the impact on girls. What is the impact of abortion on women and girls? We'll talk about the negative physical impacts first. Over 30% of American women, according to the Medical Science Monitor, suffer health complications after undergoing an abortion. Now, I want you to think about this statistic because this comes from the United States, which is a very developed country and has an excellent health system. So imagine what the complications might be for a developing country where women seek to procure an abortion. Here's just a partial list of some of the negative physical impacts, including accidental tearing of uterine artery, infection, heavy bleeding that could require a blood transfusion, scarring of the uterine wall, uterine perforation, breast cancer, miscarriage, infertility, subsequent tubal pregnancies, embolisms, sterility, and death. This comes from the Obstetrics and Gynecology Journal, which found that about 10% of women who have an abortion experience complications immediately, including cervical injury and perforation of the uterus. Leading causes of death during the week after an abortion include hemorrhage, infection, embolism, anesthesia complications, and undiagnosed ectopic pregnancies. This article, Risk Factors for Triple-Negative Breast Cancer in Women Under the Age of 45 Years, states that the risk of breast cancer was 40% higher in women who had an induced abortion as compared with women who did not. Now, when I first started about 20 years ago in the pro-life movement, and I heard that abortion can cause an increase in breast cancer, I really thought that sounded a little bit absurd. I thought, surely, we're going a little too far in making this claim. But in the 20 years that I've been advocating for the protection of life, I've learned a little bit more about this and why it is absolutely true. This article, The Pregnancy Characteristics and Subsequent Breast Cancer Risk Among Young Women, states that pregnancy and especially first pregnancy appears to represent a critical window in determining future breast cancer risk. It goes on to state, a significant elevation of breast cancer risk was associated with the history of induced abortion, but not spontaneous abortion. What this is saying is that this increase for breast cancer does not occur when there is a natural miscarriage. It only happens when there is an induced abortion. And here's the explanation of why this happens. The mammary cells, or the breast cells, are thought to proliferate during the first and second trimester of pregnancy, and they don't differentiate and become completely mature until the third trimester when they're preparing for breastfeeding and mothering. So when these breast cells during the first trimester are starting to change, they start to also become vulnerable and susceptible because they're not completely mature, but they're growing and the metabolic activity is increasing inside them. Moreover, increased breast hyperplasia followed by termination of pregnancy prior to full differentiation of these mammary stem cells may increase the breast's susceptibility to neoplasia. Now, this doctor explained it also in more simple terms. Two aspects of induced abortion may increase cancer risk. First, abortion typically is done in a time frame after the estrogen spike, which can stimulate immature cells to become more metabolically active and increase their number. So we're talking about the first trimester of abortion. The estrogen spike in the body shoots up the roof to start preparing the breasts. Now, I was diagnosed with stage 1A breast cancer at the beginning of this year. Unfortunately, we caught it really early, but when they tested my breast cancer, and before they removed it, they said it was called estrogen positive. That means that estrogen stimulates the breast cancer to grow more and more, which is what's happening during the first trimester for girls and women, and all women and girls. That estrogen spikes up. And so these cells start growing, and if they don't differentiate and actually become mature, which happens later on in the pregnancy, if the pregnancy is arrested through induced abortion, then that makes them more susceptible to that breast cancer. So he says, second, early termination of the pregnancy delays breast maturation, which typically occurs as the pregnancy progresses. These effects are present regardless of whether the abortion is induced surgically or chemically. Again, this does not happen with a natural miscarriage. For some reason, the body is able to handle that change and not increase the risk in those cells for breast cancer. Now, currently, I am supposed to take an estrogen blocking pill every day for 5 years because that estrogen could cause me to have cancer again or to cause any cell in my body to cause that cancer to grow. Continuing with the negative physical impact of abortion on women, abortion increases self-destructive lifestyles practices, increasing the risk of promiscuity, smoking, drug abuse, and eating disorders, which all put women at an increased risk for other health problems. And I've talked to many post-abortive women who have given their testimonies about how they have been at increased risk and experienced many of these things. In fact, there's an organization based in the United States called Silent No More, and they have collected thousands of testimonies from thousands of women across the globe, and you can go to their website and look up testimonies from your specific country, and you can even decide what kind of topics of testimony that you would like to hear from them on their website, and I encourage you to go there. And this is just one of many groups of women who have started organizations to tell the world that abortion is harmful. And then this physical impact comes from the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology from Canada. It found that abortion can cause long-term and sometimes permanent damage to reproductive organs that can put future pregnancies at risk. After an abortion, women are more likely to experience ectopic pregnancies, infertility, hysterectomies, stillbirths, miscarriages, and premature births than women who have not had abortions. After abortion, for subsequent pregnancies, there is a 7 to 15-fold increase in placenta previa, a life-threatening condition for the mother and baby that increases the risk of birth defects, stillbirth, and excessive bleeding during labor. This article, The History of Induced Abortion as a Risk Factor for Preterm Birth in European Countries, states, previous induced abortions were significantly associated with preterm delivery, and the risk of preterm birth increased with the number of abortions. Further, between 1989 and 1993, Poland's induced abortion rate decreased 98% due to a new restrictive abortion law. Then the Demographic Yearbook of Poland reports that between 1995 and 1997, the rate of extreme preterm births dropped by 21% because there were less abortions. So there were less preterm births. Now let's move on to the negative psychological impact of abortion on women. Here's just a partial list that includes anger, depression, anniversary grief, sexual dysfunction, eating disorders, alcohol and drug abuse, and suicide. So this is from the British Journal of Psychiatry, and they found through a meta-analysis covering 14 years of research that women with an abortion history experienced an 81% increased risk for mental health problems, including anxiety disorders, depression, substance abuse, and suicide behaviors. And from the Journal of Anxiety Disorders, they found through a wide range of studies that show that women who have an abortion experience psychological anxiety. Women with no previous history of anxiety were 30% more likely to show symptoms of generalized anxiety, sleeping disorders. Women were nearly twice as likely to experience sleep disorders after an abortion. Eating disorders. After abortion, 39% reported eating disorders. Substance abuse. Women had a 5 times higher rate of drug and alcohol abuse. Sexual dysfunction. 30 to 50% of post-abortive women report experiencing sexual dysfunctions, such as promiscuity, loss of pleasure from intercourse, increased pain, and aversion to sex and/or men. And a study in the Canadian Journal of Psychiatry found that women who had abortions also had a 59% increase for suicidal thoughts, 61% increased risk for mood disorders, 61% increase for social anxiety disorders, a 261% increase for alcohol abuse, and a 280% increased risk for substance use disorder. Now let's focus on girls, teenage girls, the negative physical impact of abortion on these girls. Suicide. If a teenage girl has an abortion in the last 6 months, she is 6 times more likely to attempt suicide than teenagers who have not had an abortion. Teenage girls who have had an abortion are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than adult women who abort. And then from this Journal of Youth and Adolescence, after an abortion, teen girls are 3 times more likely to report subsequent sleeping disorders and are trouble sleeping, and are 9 times more likely to report using marijuana. So what are the negative psychological impacts of abortion on girls? Compared to teens in general, teenage girls who have an abortion are nearly 3 times more likely to be admitted to a mental health hospital. Teen girls who abort are twice as likely as their peers to abuse alcohol or cocaine, was found in one study. And another study found that teen girls who abort experience increased rates of depression, anxiety disorder, suicidal ideation, alcohol dependence, illicit drug dependence, nicotine dependence, and cannabis abuse. This is from the Journal of Adolescence. Compared to older abortion patients, teen girls who have abortions are more likely to have severe nightmares and score higher on measurements of antisocial traits, paranoia, psychotic delusions, and drug abuse, and have more problems later regarding sexuality and parenting. From the American Journal of Public Health, teen girls who have aborted a baby are 4 times more likely to have a repeat abortion. And after an abortion, teen girls are likely to become pregnant again within the next few years. This is from the Canadian Medical Association Journal. And with the remaining time, we'll just briefly treat this question: is abortion safer than childbirth? From the Post-Abortion Review, they found that compared to women who carried to term, women who had an abortion the year prior to their deaths were 60% more likely to die from natural causes, 7 times more likely to die from suicide, 4 times more likely to die of injuries related to accidents, 14 times more likely to die from homicide. Now here's a chart that this is measuring these statistics in Finland from the British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and it shows the suicide rate between 2001 to 2012 in Finland, comparing a woman or a girl who is not pregnant to a woman or a girl who is pregnant to those that had abortions. And you can see that those that had abortions have an extremely high suicide rate compared to the other categories. This is again from Finland in the British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and this shows the mortality rate, the death rate of women. Those that are not pregnant is the first bar, those that are pregnant, the second bar, and those who have had abortion is the third bar. Again, those that had abortion have a much higher mortality rate. They also looked at the decrease of the mortality rate over time, because mortality rates in Finland and also in many places have been decreasing. And they looked at those who were not pregnant. The mortality rate for them decreased 18%. Those who were pregnant, it actually decreased way more to 27% decrease, because we're now having much better, medical technology and knowledge in the medical field. But look at the abortion statistic. There was only a 10% decrease in mortality rates for women who had abortion compared to the other decreases. And then this is from the Medical Science Monitor. Compared to women who delivered a baby, women who aborted were 65% more likely to experience long-term clinical depression. Now, I'm going to end with a personal story. When I was pregnant with my 4th child, I started to have high blood pressure, and they rushed me to the hospital for eclampsia, and I actually started to go into a seizure. And they told me, "Ma'am, we're going to have to deliver the baby in order to save your life. Your life is in danger." They told me they could wait for 45 minutes for my husband to arrive. At least they hoped they could, and they would watch and see, but they were able to, and he was able to get there. And they delivered my baby. She was about 5 weeks early, and she was rushed off to the NICU, and I didn't get to see her for a few days because she had some problems. I didn't get to bring her home from the hospital for a few weeks. She was about 4 pounds, just barely over 4 pounds when she was born, but she survived because they worked to save both the mother and the child. This is my daughter Jessica now with her husband, and this is my grandbaby Graham. And they're alive today, again, because the doctors worked to save both the mother and child. Often we hear that we need to legalize abortion or perform abortions to save the life of the mother. Well, indeed, you may need to deliver the baby. You may need to remove the baby from the mother. And if the baby's not viable, in some cases, the baby may die, which is very sad and very tragic. But there is never a medical instance, I've talked to many doctors about this, where you actually have to intentionally kill the baby before you deliver it. Deliver, a saline poison to kill it, or inject some chemical in their heart to cause them a heart attack, or to dismember the baby limb by limb, which are methods of abortion that have been used commonly. That's never necessary to save the life of the mother. So I'll just end with this. Women and girls deserve better than abortion, and we should always work to save both the mother and the child. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for your speech. It was really, really important and evidence-based piece of knowledge, and it shows that the arguments of people that are advocating for abortion are just based on false arguments. And the truth is on our side, the truth that is based on evidence. It is so clear that abortion is against women's health, and it's a serious threat to women's health, to women's life. So thank you very much for that. And now I would like to ask our next speaker, Mrs. Laetitia Policon, lobbyist to the European Institutions on Women's Rights and Ethics of New Technologies. Mrs. Policon will give us a lecture on relations between feminism and modern reproductive technologies and threats that are connected with these tendencies and new opportunities of new technologies. Thank you so much.
So my presentation aims at demonstrating that artificial reproductive technologies are a serious breach of women's rights, and this is tonight's topic. ART is, in essence, an umbrella term used to describe different technologies that either create outside of the womb or assist human procreation by intervening on the natural process of conception for a new human life. I'll make one caveat here. My intervention does exclude ART that only consists of stimulating ovaries for immediate implantation of an embryo from both parents without freezing or discarding any of them. That being said, and taken more broadly, I'd say that beside IVF and egg donation / selling, artificial reproductive technologies do include surrogacy, abortion, hormonal therapies, and embryonic stem cell harvesting in order to curb and master the human reproduction. And as you know, it's common knowledge, right, that contraception, abortion, and IVF techniques liberate women from the constraints of time and eventually from the chores of pregnancy. This was a joke. Now, why is ART unsafe for the woman's health? First, you can point out to numerous lawsuits relating to deaths and health damages caused by hormonal treatments during egg collection, during surrogate pregnancy and abortion procedures. Moreover, Planned Parenthood's dirty little secret was unveiled by a video showing that body parts from aborted fetus were harvested into order by pharmaceutical and cosmetic companies. Equally, fertility clinics keep secrecy on fresh / frozen egg harvesting and the ovarian and breast cancers that arise after a few hormonal stimulation and ovum cycles, collection cycles. As part of the French bioethics law review, the French Parliament recently required that widowed women and single women would have access to embryos to conceive babies in a new form of family. Equally, the report calls for the total transgressive new ground, that of creating transgenic embryos. No principle of precaution is ever applied, and women would bring to life possibly seriously defective babies at the cost of their own health and possibly death. Finally, in the case of a proven infertility, parents would become less and less fertile, which would mechanically create an infertility pandemic by generating an auto-generated and endemic infertility, calling for more ART, which is a vicious circle, really. Now that we've said that ART was unsafe for the woman and the child, why is ART illegal? The European Union, the Council of Europe, United Nations, and many other international bodies have introduced very well-intentioned declarations, legally binding conventions, directives, treaties, etc., whereby they condemn eugenics for human selection and sex selection. They condemn genome editing, cloning. They condemn all forms of discrimination against women and protect human dignity. They condemn human trafficking, especially against women and children. In fact, ART facilitates those practices in exposing and objectivizing the unprotected embryo. Unlike the European ban on the use of certain genetically modified organisms, embryo stem cells and the fetus itself remain unprotected. They become raw material for eugenics and research. Right after the ratification in 1997 of the Geneva Convention, an international legally binding convention instrument on the protection of human rights and dignity in the biomedical field, it was instantly trampled by ART technology stakeholders and research labs. Now, health practitioners in the fertility business are not subject to medical specialty regulation, and this is something that really strikes me as being so illegal without being told. Those health practitioners practice egg harvesting procedures with no legal constraint and rarely inform the donor, quote unquote, of the medical risks and warnings about the procedure. The donor recruiter himself, him or herself, is a non-medical professional who built the donor's file both psychologically and physically. Another example of a very illegal practice is that cryogenized embryos travel the world without being checked, even in countries where egg donation is forbidden. The Aviation Association regulation allows for the transportation of frozen human material, and package of embryos are never checked or scanned at the border. In Europe, surrogacy is either banned or not legally permitted. Not prohibited does not mean it's legal, nor just. Now that we've seen that ART is unsafe and somehow illegal, let's see why it actually constitutes a very strong neoliberal patriarchal market. Many stakeholders want to have a share of this very lucrative pie, which is ART. Pharmaceutical companies, doctors, fertility, surrogacy agencies, lawyers, harvesting clinics, advocacy groups, etc. The founder of Biotech's Con, a company based in Seychelles, a renowned fiscal haven, tax haven, Albert Tochilovsky, welcomes the birth of 500 children a year in his clinic. And he says, quote unquote, "A third of my clients are Chinese. They want boys. And guess what? Anyway, soon we will have children in incubators without women." Worth mentioning, the surrogacy market itself is the best kept secret, and the market studies only display figures that actually encompass the whole of the ART package sold to the commissioning parents. Donation, compensation, or very efficient wording tricks to hide the reality of the sale of a mother's womb or her raw materials, as well as the child. The global ART market size is projected to reach $45 billion by 2026. These market studies actually admit that it's projected to gain impetus from the rising incidence of infertility, backed by a rapidly changing lifestyle. And this, again, is really striking. Asia Pacific is planned to generate a possible 11% growth in a region where ethics of life is knowingly more lenient than in Europe. Canadian sociologist Cécile Lafontaine explained the ins and outs of this capitalistic trade of the body. She says, at the beginning of the 1980s, sperm and ovum banks were flourishing in California in order to split the biological work of reproduction among multiple bodies. In the case of surrogacy, the whole reproductive job is subcontracted. Now, Men Having Babies trade show just took place via Zoom just last week for European homo couples. It usually takes place in Brussels, right around the corner from the Apple Store. And what they presented this year was a surrogacy cost calculator. And you can actually punch in whether you want an egg donation, whether you want screening, a DNA screening, whether you want a boy or a girl, whether you want a surrogate mother from Asia or whatever, and then it would actually calculate the cost for you, your total cost. This is a little anthology of what was said during this trade show. Your lawyer is your best partner. Financing is my favorite part of this conference. Surrogate mothers aren't paid, but we use a positive pregnancy fee, meaning that in reality, no babies, no births, no money. And we all know that pregnancies sometimes end up in miscarriage. A few costs, just to give you a heads up of how much it costs and why it ends up being such a huge market. IVF procedures cost from 6,000 euros to 11,000 euros in the United States, for instance. Eggs, be it frozen or fresh, with screening for sex selection or DNA sequencing, cost between 14,000 euros per cycle. And usually an IVF procedure requires 6 to 7 eggs harvested. Egg freezing, 750 euros of storage fee per year. Genome sequencing, 7,000 euros per genome, but costs are actually going down on this one. Worth mentioning is that China keeps a record of DNA for more than 20 million Chinese, and aims at creating the Google of genes, Google, the DNA Google, if you'd like. 2,000 euros for transportation of cryogenized embryos, for instance, with a dozen travel agents traveling around the world to deliver backpacks with embryos from India, where it's actually egg donation is banned, to Georgia, Ukraine, Russia for surrogacy purposes. And then there's a whole ecosystem of stakeholders who want their share of this market: lawyers, surrogacy agencies, psychologists, etc. They will never be experiencing unemployment, those people, for sure. Now, in conclusion, I'd like to express why I truly believe that ART discriminate against women. In the name of equal access to work, some women claim their rights to be liberated from the contingency of pregnancy. And the transhumanist philosophical approach to humanity is that of physical, cognitive, and psychological enhanced capacities. ART and ectogenesis, the artificial uterus, are therefore very desirable. The well-intentioned declaration by the European Union just last year, for instance, against maternal mobbing at work and the promotion of equal opportunity and professional/family life balance are useless until our governments actually realize that women pay the price of life in their own body and soul, that we owe our mothers an incredible debt, that of life, filiation, family bonds when possible at all. Despite quotas, there are still few mothers in leading positions in Fortune 100 companies. Same goes with political leaders. But how can mothers' needs be recognized, supported, and valued when they have no one to represent them? The fundamental question, therefore, remains: is reproduction a discrimination or a fundamental bodily attribute and state of mind and soul of women? Will our daughters still be allowed to have children of their own from their own womb? The woman's body is obliterated in surrogacy, in egg harvesting, and even in the sale of other body parts. The woman's body is experienced in its objective dimension as an object differentiated from the subject, i.e., I have a body, rather than in its relation to being, as a sociologist says in an essay called The Unbirthing of the World. Basically, the body becomes parceled out, fragmented. In other words, it becomes an economic body. The desire of certain feminists to free themselves from the biologizing and naturalizing conception of the body, of the differences between sexes, in favor of a purely constructivist perspective, has blinded us of the real objectives of biotechnologies. On the one hand, the female body becomes a stack of raw materials, and on the other hand, women banking their oocytes, menstrual menstrual blood enter a fully neoliberal patriarchal economy of biocitizenship. Going even further, blurring the boundaries between humanity and animal life, between man and machine, Donna Haraway in her 1985 Cyborg Manifesto claims, cyborgs have more to do with regeneration and are suspicious of the reproductive matrix and of most birthing. We believe, and I will conclude with that with ART and NBIC technologies, women will be encouraged to become non-sexualized, autonomous economic agents. And that, I believe, is a true breach of women's rights and a profound misunderstanding of womanhood. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Letitia, for this lecture. And I think it was also very, very interesting lecture because you showed us something very important, that the so-called biological revolution, which was a dream of so many feminists, in fact leads to something contrary and totally opposite to the women's rights. It leads, as you said, to the economization, yes, of reproduction and economization of women's body. It leads to treating human as an object of merchandise. So thank you so much for this lecture. I think it was really, really important, and it shows us next dangers that we will have to face in the future. And now I will pass voice to Mrs. Alix Lejar from Femina Europe. Mrs. Alix Lejar is a representative of Femina Europe to European Parliament, and is going to speak about the genesis of sexual and reproductive health agenda, how it became women's rights, and will provide us an overview of the situation in France concerning these topics. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. First, I want to thank you, all the inspiring speakers, and especially Sharon Slater, because and all the wonderful Family Watch International webinars, which inspired the presentation I'm going to do now.
During this short presentation, Femina Europa will show you what is at stake with the so-called sexual and reproductive rights that the United Nations organization is seeking to impose. We will first expose the UN agenda about sexual and reproductive health and rights. Then, we will see the implementation of this agenda in our country. And to conclude, we will give our insight about what should be women's rights. In 1994, Cairo in Egypt hosted the 4th International Conference on Population and Development, ICPD. The conference introduced a new human right called reproductive health. You have to know that to this day, that self-proclaimed basic human right is not accepted nor recognized around the world. So, let's see how the UN is trying to push forward reproductive health as a right. In 2000, the Millennium Development Goals were introduced, and reproductive health was inserted in goals 3, 4, and 5. So it was not a goal in itself, but it was an important component of MDGs. In 2012, a so-called high-level task force for ICPD was set up in order to push forward the agenda of sexual and reproductive rights. This body of 25 experts declared in 2014, sexual and reproductive health and rights are cornerstones of women's rights and gender equality. This is another step. The word sexual is added to reproductive. The question is, why? Why is sexuality introduced as a human right? Is sexuality the cornerstone of women's rights? Don't you find that this way of thinking is a very narrow approach compared to the large needs of the women, such as education? Yes, what about universal access to education for women? The focus here is only on sexuality and reproduction. And so, no wonder that in 2015, we see these sexual and reproductive rights appear amidst the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. The 17 SDG goals were set in order to end extreme poverty and hunger, fight inequality and injustice, and tackle climate change by 2030. But what does it mean really for UN to ensure access to universal reproductive rights and health? Is it really for the well-being of women, of children, of families? Or are the men? Let's go a bit forward. Those sexual and reproductive health and rights are promoted by the World Health Organization, WHO, as you can see in this publication. We would like to underline the subtitle Human Reproduction Program of the booklet, including all the UN agencies, and the official partner of the program, IPPF, International Planned Parenthood. What does that mean? Does that mean that contraception and abortion are the cornerstones of women's rights? Nothing else? That this program is all about monitoring women's fertility through contraception and abortion? This is extremely disappointing. The Human Reproduction Program has an agenda in 2 points. Comprehensive sexuality education is a tool to sexualize children from the very young age and to promote the UN Reproductive Rights Agenda to the youth. Our presentation will focus on the first point, sexual and reproductive health services and rights. First, let's have a look at the definition of sexual health given by the World Health Organization in this document, Sexual Health, Human Rights and the Law, published in 2015. It says that sexual health is related to sexuality, sexual practices, contraception, and sexually transmitted infections. In fact, the whole document promotes contraception, abortion, hormonal therapies, and gender equality according to the gender ideology. Maternity protection, maternal health are cited only once and only in relation to the people engaged in sex work. The answer to the issue of maternal mortality, as you can see, is contraception. As if education, better maternal health care were not the adequate means to reduce maternal mortality. Look at what WHO declares about unsafe abortion on his website. WHO declares that unsafe abortion can be prevented through comprehensive sexuality education, emergency contraception, and provision of safe and legal abortion. How can they say that because abortion is medical, legal, it is safe? In France, we just had the case of a woman who was amputated of both legs and arms after an abortion performed in an hospital. Abortion is never safe. It can be less dangerous if performed in a hospital, but it is always a trauma for the woman. Abortion is a violent interruption of a natural process. And we can't ignore the post-abortion syndromes for women. And of course, it is not at all safe for the fetus. Isn't a woe statement totally deceiving? In the 2015 WHO document, not a word about the impact of hormonal treatments on women's health. WHO seems to forget his own advice given in 2005, showing the risk of cancer linked to the use of contraception. Are women guinea pigs for pharmaceutical industry? Not a word also on the impact of contraception on the environment, on water, for instance. What about the principle of precaution? Many studies have proven that chemical hormones are toxic for the environment, but still millions of women swallow this poison every day. France is a good pupil for the implementation of sexual and reproductive health and rights. Do you notice that same-sex marriage is also part of the UN reproduction program? France ratified 2 binding international conventions. In 1983, the Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and in 2014, the Istanbul Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. We all agree about the elimination of discrimination and violence against women. The problem is a gender ideology inserted in those 2 conventions. Gender is not the answer to violence. In 2013, France created the High Commission for Equality, Haut Conseil à l'Égalité, which steers our national policy to take into account the Istanbul and CEDAW conventions, as well as the UN sexual and reproductive health and rights at all levels: education, health, culture, budgeting. What is the result of this integrated policy? Did it improve the well-being of French women and men? Let us look at the statistics. This one shows a high level of violence in France, especially against women. The UN conventions are not delivering their promises. Gender policy is not the answer to the problem of violence against women. On the Contraception Atlas of the European Union, France has one of the highest ranking concerning access to the so-called modern contraception. Despite a strong promotion of chemical contraception, comprehensive sexuality education, France has also a very high level of abortions and has twice more abortions than Germany. So our policy again is not successful. We also have a problem in France with freedom of speech concerning abortion. It is very dangerous to speak against abortion in our country. A law was voted against abortion obstruction in 1993 and reinforced in 2017 towards the pro-life websites. For this year, 2020, a bioethical law is under study, which will extend the right to abortion until birth in some cases. It seems that in France, the so-called Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights program implies always more and more abortion and contraception. But there is hope, as we observe a widening gap between state policies promoting abortion and contraception and a young generation of women sensitive to ecology, to sustainable development. Those women speak freely about natural fertility methods. They want to act being more respectful of the environment. They are keen on restoring the link with men and are eager to reappropriate the control and meaning of their bodies. To conclude, Femina Europa is concerned by the real needs and desires of women. We refuse to see human rights twisted, as do the so-called UN sexual and reproductive rights. Femina Europa values women's identity in its full dimension and in complementarity and reciprocity with men. We need men as they need us. Restoring the relationship between men and women is the cornerstone of a happy sexual and reproductive health and rights policy. Femina Europa promotes the necessity of human ecology as a rediscovering of the interactions between man, woman, and nature. We want a real free choice for women, reconciling work and personal life. We value the invisible and non-market work carried out by women within the family. We work for the consideration of motherhood in our societies and the development of a sustainable women's health care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was so important to see how the sexual reproductive health and rights agenda was year by year developed at the international level, this history of this notion and how it was fostered at the United Nations is very important. And it is also very important to see how this agenda and also gender ideology does not give any effective solutions to the problems of today's women. Because as you just shown us on the example of your country, the situation of women did not get better at all, and the abortion rates are higher and higher. And also this very disturbing proposition of a new abortion law is something really, really bad. I hope that there is a slight chance to just stop this project, because it's really, really dangerous.
Yes, we fight for that.
Yes, thank you so much. And last but not least, I would like to ask Mrs. Dorota Bojemska, who is a representative of our Ministry of Family, Employment and Social Affairs, and head of Family Council of the Prime Minister of Poland, to speak about issues connected to women's rights here in our country, in Poland. Thank you so much.
Dzień dobry Państwu. Bardzo dziękuję za zaproszenie na tę konferencję. Dziękuję również organizatorom za podjęcie tak ważnego tematu. Jest on wyjątkowo aktualny dla nas w Polsce, ponieważ przetoczyły się w tej chwili protesty związane z orzeczeniem Trybunału Konstytucyjnego, który orzekł, że przesłanka eugeniczna w sprawie aborcji nie może mieć miejsca, gdyż jest niezgodna z konstytucją. To wywołało szereg protestów. Jego inicjatorkami były przedstawicielki skrajnej lewicy. Za nimi poszły młode kobiety, szereg kobiet i w ogóle młodych ludzi. Dlatego ten temat jest ważny, bo musimy mówić, czym są prawa kobiety i jak rozumiemy je również my. Natomiast też trzeba zdawać sobie sprawę z tego, że nie możemy oderwać tych kwestii od pewnego kontekstu historyczno-cywilizacyjno-kulturowego. My wczoraj przeżywaliśmy rocznicę odzyskania przez Polskę niepodległości. 11 listopada 1918 roku Polska odzyskała niepodległość i był to też ten dzień, w którym kobiety wraz z podarowaną niepodległością otrzymały prawo głosu, czyli ta niepodległość została, można powiedzieć, oddana w ręce obywateli Polek i Polaków. I było to dość wcześnie jak na ówczesny świat, dlatego że prawo głosu kobiety w Anglii zdobyły w 1928 roku, a we Francji w 1944. Mówię o tym dlatego, że tutaj warto jeszcze powiedzieć, że te lata niewoli były takim specyficznym czasem też dla historii kobiet w Polsce, dlatego że one niejako musiało dojść do pewnego rodzaju równouprawnienia, ponieważ one musiały przejąć męskie role wówczas. Jako opiekunki, strażniczki domowego ogniska właśnie, ale również jako żywicielki, jako osoby odpowiedzialne za byt rodziny, za gospodarstwo, za dom, za to, co się wokół tego działo, ale również za kulturę, za cały ten świat także niematerialny, który musiały przekazać i przekazały kolejnym pokoleniom. Także pozycja kobiet w Polsce była i jest dość silna i kobieta w Polsce zawsze była traktowana nie tylko jako żona, matka, strażniczka domowego ogniska, ale również jako jednocześnie też warto powiedzieć, jako osoba zaangażowana społecznie i politycznie. Dzisiaj pojęcie praw kobiet zostało zredukowane do kwestii seksualnych czy obyczajowych. Wspomniane liderki skrajnej lewicy niosą hasła aborcji na życzenie i ta aborcja na życzenie ma dać kobiecie totalną wolność. I właśnie tu możemy się zatrzymać, bo to warto się zatrzymać i zobaczyć, że na poziomie wielkich pojęć, właśnie pojęć wolności, pojęcia wolnego wyboru, pojęcia miłości, na tym poziomie już dochodzi do bardzo dużego konfliktu poznawczego. To znaczy na tym poziomie nie możemy się już porozumieć. Inaczej rozumiemy te pojęcia, inaczej inne dla nas mają wymiar, inną wagę. To jest bardzo trudne dla młodych ludzi, dlatego że oni się w tym rzeczywiście gubią i bardzo łatwo chłoną tę narrację równościową, emancypacyjną. Taką narrację, która młodym kobietom każe tak naprawdę upodobnić się do mężczyzn, to znaczy zrównać się z mężczyznami. Kobieta ma walczyć ze swoją naturą, dostosować swój przecież nieco inny świat do świata męskiego, tak? Przejąć jego rolę. Ostatecznie orientuje się jedno i drugie, że tak naprawdę do życia nie jest potrzebna ani kobieta mężczyźnie, ani mężczyzna kobiecie. Tylko pytanie, czy nie jest potrzebna do szczęścia, bo to jest to pytanie, które każdy człowiek u progu życia sobie zadaje, to znaczy jak mogę być szczęśliwy. W 2019 roku CEBOS zrobił badania, w których wyszło, że Polacy zapytani o to, jaką formę życia widzieliby dla siebie, uznaliby za najlepszą dla siebie, odpowiedzieli w 88% ogółem, że widzieliby taką rolę dla siebie w rodzinie. Rodzina 55% odpowiedziało, że chciałoby żyć w rodzinie z małą liczbą dzieci. 35% powiedziało, że chciałoby żyć w rodzinie wielopokoleniowej i licznej. Co to oznacza? To oznacza, że u większości ludzi jest pragnienie życia we wspólnocie. I tą wspólnotą najbardziej podstawową jest rodzina. I to pragnienie człowiek po prostu w sobie nosi. Narracja, o której wspomniałam, równościowa, emancypacyjna, prowadzi natomiast do promowania postaw indywidualistycznych i konsumpcyjnych. Te postawy stają w sprzeczności do wspólnoty, do tworzenia wspólnot, do tworzenia tożsamości wspólnotowej również. Dlatego bardzo trudno jest dzisiejszym kobietom, młodym kobietom odnaleźć się, dlatego że one się orientują po jakimś czasie, że tak naprawdę ten najlepszy okres, w którym mogły stworzyć rodzinę, mogły zostać matkami, musiały przeznaczyć na realizację kariery zawodowej i bardzo trudno było im się zorientować na wspólnotę. Więc moim postulatem i to, z czym dzisiaj chciałabym do Państwa tutaj zadać takie pytanie i dzisiaj o tym powiedzieć, to jest to, czy kobieta ma prawo do życia we wspólnocie, do stworzenia tej wspólnoty i do otoczenia jej troską. Czy kobieta ma prawo do oczekiwania komplementarności, to znaczy nie zrównywania się z mężczyzną, natomiast stworzenia wspólnoty, która byłaby komplementarna i byłaby i każdy w tej wspólnocie mógłby odnaleźć się, poczuć się zaopiekowany, poczuć się spełniony. To jest moje pytanie, dlatego że wiem, że prestiż zawodowy u kobiet jest przez obecną kulturę pokazywany jako sukces życiowy kobiety. Natomiast kompletnie pozbawione prestiżu jest praca kobiet w domu. A to jest praca, która powinna być przedmiotem zainteresowania nie tylko twórców, nie tylko ludzi, którzy mają wpływ są opiniotwórczy, ale również tych, którzy konstruują narzędzia w administracji publicznej, narzędzia takie, żeby kobiety mogły realizować swoje powołanie właśnie również jako matki, ale również jako współtworząc wspólnoty rodzinne. I takie narzędzia można tworzyć, takie narzędzia są możliwe, natomiast musimy wyjść poza schemat myślenia równościowego. Jednym z takich narzędzi na przykład jest kwestia odejścia do wyłącznie instytucjonalnej opieki nad dziećmi do lat 3. To jest temat ważny. 15% kobiet tylko mówi o tym, że chciałoby dzieci oddawać do żłobka. Żłobki w związku z tym powinny powstawać, natomiast myślenie o tym, w jaki sposób można kobiecie pomóc, tak by ona mogła być z dzieckiem przynajmniej do roku, ale do lat 3, jeżeli chce tego, jeżeli ma taką możliwość, jeżeli chce mieć kolejne dzieci, to są takie narzędzia, które mogą pomóc kobiecie zrealizować swoje marzenia o tym, by mieć rodzinę, a jednocześnie móc za jakiś czas powrócić do życia zawodowego. Elastyczna praca zdalna. Bardzo dużo nam pokazała pandemia i pokazała nam sytuacja covidowa. Po pierwsze pokazała nam, jak ważne jest życie we wspólnocie. To znaczy, jak ważne jest to, żeby mieć wokół siebie ludzi, którzy są w stanie nam w trudnych sytuacjach pomóc, o których możemy się oprzeć. Jednocześnie tam, gdzie rodziny były liczniejsze, łatwiej tak naprawdę przyszło przeżywać pandemię. Sama mam takie doświadczenie, dlatego że dzieci bawiły się wspólnie ze sobą, mogło zachodzić więcej interakcji i nie było po prostu poczucia samotności. Natomiast z drugiej strony to, co wydaje się bardzo ważne, to też fakt pracy zdalnej. To znaczy okazało się, że można pracować zdalnie w domu i można wykonywać tę pracę jednocześnie będąc w zasięgu tego, co się wokół nas dzieje, co dla kobiet często, zwłaszcza kiedy mają małe dzieci, a jest to przecież okres, który stosunkowo szybko mija, a jednocześnie pozwala kobiecie zachować jakąś możliwość połączenia pracy w domu z pracą zawodową. Także takie narzędzia są, ale musimy wyjść poza schemat tego, że kobiety muszą dorównać mężczyznom, dlatego że jesteśmy inne. Nasza natura skłania nas do tego, żeby tworzyć dom, tworzyć wspólnotę i móc poświęcić się również właśnie pracy w domu. Dziękuję bardzo za możliwość wystąpienia. Z uwagą będę się przysłuchiwać innym prelegentkom. Mam nadzieję, że to będzie ciekawa dyskusja i dobry czas dla nas wszystkich. Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you, Dorota, so much for your lecture and presenting what is the situation of Polish women, what are the problems and the great opportunities for our development of women's rights here in Poland. And I think that your presentation was also a great kind of summing up our two panels because your presentation was the last one, and it shows us maybe a direction in which we all should go with our policies aiming to improve the situation of women in our countries. So thank you again so much for your lecture. And now someone just asked about how we can help lonely mothers that were abandoned by their partners.
First of all, we have to be beside them to have the baby. No, so that's something we are doing there with lots of NGOs in Brazil that are receiving the mom to have the baby, and well, the majority in this case, they choose to have the baby and stay with it instead of giving. And then we give a support, a psychological support, accompanying them in whatever we can, but mainly it's not the government, but NGOs. And they really have a support in this case, and people, young mothers can go for it. Another thing we are doing there is to try to have jobs for these moms so that they can be with work to support the baby and be with the baby too. So we have a project that is entrepreneurship for young like moms, or dads in the case, to help them to help them have a job and solve economic problems that sometimes are harsh, and also when they are left, we try to have we call roda de conversa. It is meetings that they can share experience and help each other in their experience, as we have in the United States that too, but departing from civil society. There in Brazil, we say that, it's less government and more civil society. And we try to give information and help them to get involved in this social problems, but we have to be beside them. And I see that sometimes we wait somebody to be beside them from, from somewhere, like the government or an NGO, but I can see that we can help. We all have people in these conditions, So what do we do? How we help them to go for the problems and persevere and everything? And I can say that much of the problem is to listen to them, to try to understand their situation, and help, and also in some cases help to rebuild the life. And this is a task everyone can have in society. You can look around and you're going to see a person in this situation. What did we do for her? Sometimes we speak in society, but we have each person no, beside us. So there are things from the government, things from the civil society, but it's all about us too, no? And this everyone can do.
Thank you so much for your answer. Yeah, I think this is very important to create a society that will be guided by the rules of social solidarity, subsidiarity, proportionality of government's actions, because it is very much important to create communities, to rebuild communities in our countries, and in this way help each other. So if there are no other questions, I would like to thank you once more again for attending our conference. As I said, we will definitely organize the next panels concerning various topics, family issues, but also issues connected with combating violence against women, towards women, issues with connected with fighting with sexualization of women, with pornography that is showing women as sexual objects, and various aspects of women's rights and protection of women's rights. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you too.
Yes.
I just want to thank Ordo Iuris and everyone this evening. I learned a lot with you, know each one, and I ask each one of you to give this information in your country and all around, wherever you can. And I also want to finish with one small story I just heard in Brazil. There was a woman that she decided to have her baby. She couldn't. She was like she had health problems, and she said, "But I don't want to kill my baby. I'm gonna have it." And actually, the baby died, and she died too. But before dying, she said that I know I did the right thing. And she said, "And I'm gonna meet my baby." No. And I hope every woman can have the baby here, and one day meet this baby forever. So please, let's stand for life together. That's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much, and see you next time. Bye-bye.